Good morning.
Good morning. So, our pastor went to a wedding this weekend, so he'll be back later. He'll be back in time for the business meeting, but he asked me to speak this morning. And, in kind of deciding what to speak on is always a difficult topic. It's always a challenge for me. Because as a preacher, you kind of know what things are going on in your mind and your heart, but then when you preach, you have to say, what can I share with the people at Woodside Baptist that would be relevant to their lives, that would be relevant to us as a church? So that's always a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes I tend to make the mistake where, for me personally, I'm a very theologically detailed person. I like to think about Calvinism and predestination, just those fine points of theology. But when I come to preach, I want to be a lot more practical, because practicality is what sells. Right? And sometimes that's not always good, because sometimes you make the mistake of being way too practical. So you turn your sermon into complete practical self-help. You make a sermon about how to quit smoking, how to be a better person, how to quit drinking, just all these very practical things which are very good, but you kind of lose the purpose of the Scripture. The Scripture is not necessarily there for self-help. Church is not about self-help and practically improving your life. Church is where we come to hear about God and hear from God. So I hope that we're able to be consistent with that. Because I'll tell you one thing, if we preach only practical things, I'm sure it would affect one or two people, maybe a handful of people in our church. But because everyone is different, and everyone has different issues and problems and things that they're dealing with, if you're completely practical, you leave out a lot of people. However, I can tell you that when you preach about God, when you preach about His nature, His character, His attributes, His actions, you get everyone. Because when you preach about God, just completely about God, who He is, what He's all about, then you overwhelm people with that vision of God, with His grace that is seen in the Scripture. So that's what I want to do this morning. Okay, so my pretext this morning, I'll give you an illustration. I'll tell you what I mean about preaching about the nature of God. When in the story of Moses and the burning bush, right? Moses sees a burning bush, he approaches it, God speaks to him out of the burning bush. Moses, God commissions him to go to Pharaoh. Moses says to him, "But who are you, that when the people of Israel ask me, who is this God that has sent you, what shall I tell them?" And God defines Himself. He says, "I am that I am." Tell them that I am the sent. And isn't it interesting that the way that God reveals Himself to Moses is by the term, I am. That's what He says to him. I am that I am. I am what I am. Sometimes we say that. I am what I am. We say, whatever I am, I can't change, I can't be any better. I am what I am. That's not what God meant. When God revealed Himself to Moses, He was revealing His nature to Moses. In saying that He is what He is, I am that I am, I wrote down 4 points. And I was thinking about this as Joel was teaching in Sunday school. So here's what I wrote down. And so this completely fits into my message. So number 1, God is free. Number 2, God is eternal. Number 3, God is self-existent. Number 4, God is perfect or complete. And I'll tell you what I mean by each of these. The fact that God is free means that He is not bound to any standard but Himself. You and I are bound to the laws of nature and interpersonal relationships. We are held in check by gravity. There's fears and nervousness and weakness in all of us which binds us. But God is not bound to anything outside of himself. He is not dependent on anything else, and in that, God is absolutely free. Number 2, I said God is eternal. Meaning that he is outside of time. His existence stretches from eternity to eternity. He inhabits everlasting to everlasting. If I told you that human history began here, time began here, and human history ends here, where is God? God is outside of the realm of time. God is eternal. He stretches from the everlasting to everlasting. From eternity past to eternity future. That is found in the nature of God when he says, I am that I am. He preaches, he speaks of himself in the present tense. He never was, it's not I was or I will be, I am that I am, because he is always present. He is eternal. He is outside of time. Number 3, God is self-existent. How do you define God's existence? God is the only being, the reason for whose existence is found in himself. He is not contingent upon, or there's nothing contingent. He doesn't derive his purpose or his sufficiency from anything else. We are created for a purpose outside of ourselves. God is not. God's purpose is found in himself, in who he is. That's what he means when he says, I am that I am. Lastly, he said God is perfect or complete. God cannot become any better. God cannot learn anything else. God cannot become more God than he is right now. He cannot learn more. He cannot add to his wisdom or his intelligence because he is perfect. Meaning that there is no room for improvement and there is no need for improvement on him. God is perfect or complete. And that's what he means when he says, I am that I am. I am what I am. There's no, you cannot teach God anything. You cannot make him more God. You cannot make him more holy or loving or just. He is what he is. He is complete. He is perfect. In those 4 points, God's freedom, God's eternality, God's self-existence, and God's perfection, we realize that God is self-contained. God is an independent reality. God is the most free being in the universe. He is the eternal being in the universe. He is the only being who has his purpose and his existence within himself. Not like any of us. We are contingent on other things. And God is the only being that is perfect or complete. In those 4 points, we find that God is an independent reality, while you and I, we are a contingent reality. We are dependent on so much else that defines us. God is not. God is an independent reality, and in being so, God is more real than the person sitting next to you. With that in mind, I take you to Psalm 103, and that's going to be our text this morning. Because what Psalm 103 does is that it takes things that we know about God's character and nature from the Old Testament and pulls it into this poem, into this psalm that is written by King David. And I'll give you a justification for why I chose this psalm. Sometimes it's hard for me to preach from the Old Testament because we have a conflict when we come to the Old Testament. You know, we as a church, we want to talk about Christ because we're Christians, right? But the Old Testament, we don't see Christ just talked about explicitly. Because the Old Testament looks forward to the Messiah. It's in the past and it looks forward to the Messiah. We as a church, we look backwards to the Messiah. We know who he was, how his death occurred, how his resurrection occurred. So we look backwards. The Old Testament looked forward. And so sometimes the Old Testament doesn't talk as clearly about Christ. It talks about him in an analogy, in prophecy, in figurative language. And so it's hard for me to preach from the Old Testament. It's hard for us to see our lives in the passages of the Old Testament where we can say, oh yeah, that applies to me. Well, I'll tell you why it's relevant to us. Number one, God's character and his nature doesn't change. So what I just told you that Moses experienced, the freedom, eternality, self-existence, and the perfection of God, that is still reality for us today. Secondly, it's relevant to us because the basis for all the blessings of God are still Christ. Remember, the Old Testament saints, they were sinners as well. They needed redemption. They needed salvation. Everything good that God gave them, every blessing that God gave them, came as a grace, came as a gift, because in the future, the Messiah would give himself as a sacrifice for them, just like he did for us. If they looked forward to the Messiah, we look backwards to the Messiah. And so there is relevance for our lives in the Old Testament. And that's why I chose this psalm. I'm going to read some of this psalm, then we'll pray, then we'll make application to our lives. We'll learn what this is talking about. So I'll read the first 13 verses. Just follow along as I read Psalm 103. It says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies thy mouth with good things, that thy youth is renewed like eagles. The Lord executes righteousness and judgment for all that are oppressed. He made known his ways unto Moses, and his acts unto the children of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plentiful in mercy. He will not always chide, neither will he keep his anger forever. He has not dealt with us after our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. For as the heaven is high above the earth, so great is his mercy towards them that fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Like a father pities his children, so the Lord pities those that fear him." Let's pray. Lord, as we look into this text of Scripture, I pray that you would give us wisdom and insight and sharp minds and soft hearts, that we would attend to the things that are written in this text of Scripture. And I ask this in Christ's name. We see the opening two verses of this psalm. The writer says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits." I want you to notice what God is doing. He's doing something very different from what I am doing. I am preaching to a congregation. Who's he preaching to? He's preaching to himself. He says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and everything that is within me, bless his holy name."